Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Svjetski poznat i nagrađivan fotoreporter Ron Haviv tokom posljednje 3 decenije pratio je više od 25 sukoba u stotinjak zemalja. Svojim fotografijama dokumentovao je ratne zločine i ljudska stradanja. Posvjedočio je i fotografisao pad Berlinskog zida, oslobađanje Nelsona Mendele, kokainske ratove u Kolumbiji. Predsjednik George Bush naveo je Havivove potresne fotografije nasilja paravojnih formacija u Panami kao jedan od razloga za američku invaziju 1989. godine. Haviv je nominovan i za Emmy nagradu. U vremenu kada nisu postojale društvene mreže ni pametni telefoni, Haviv je svojim fotoaparatom dokumentovao ratne strahote u Bosni i Hercegovini. Njegove fotografije zatvorenika logora u Trnopolju i Manjači kod Prijedora, kao i one iz Bijeljine i Sarajeva, korištene su kao dokazni materijal u suđenjima pred Haškim tribunalom za procesuiranje ratnih zločinaca. Haviv je objavio i 4 knjige fotografija. Njegovi radovi predstavljani su u muzejima i galerijama širom svijeta. Posljednja Havivova dokumentovanja rata dolaze iz Ukrajine, gdje je proveo 2 mjeseca. Za Al Jazeeru govori o ratu u Ukrajini, važnosti ratne fotografije, aktuelnoj izložbi u Sarajevu te obrazovanju novih generacija fotografa.
Ron, thank you for finding time for Al Jazeera. So when we arranged this interview last year, we couldn't have even imagined that the first question of the interview would not be about the exhibition, but about the war in Ukraine. You spent 2 months there. You just recently got back. So what have you witnessed so far?
Well, I was there with the expectation that something might happen, and unfortunately, of course, I was right. And I spent basically the 2 months documenting what's now kind of been referred to as the battle for Kyiv, or the battle for the north. We're based in the capital, documenting the capital being attacked, but spending more time in the outlying villages that were being affected by the Russian attacks, the Russian advances, and documenting to a large extent ethnic cleansing, documenting once again watching people being forced out of their homes either at gunpoint or by fear, leaving their homes with maybe one bag of belongings, with their cat or dog in one hand, holding one child with the other, and fleeing, not knowing if they'd be able to return, and if they were able to return, what they'd be able to return to. And towards the end of that 2 months, as the Ukrainians were able to push the Russians back and the Russians chose to fight a different way, as we entered together with the Ukrainian troops and the Ukrainian civilians, we entered this world of horror in towns such as Irpin and Bucha, and began to find what seems to be a number of atrocities, a number of war crimes, a number of mass graves. Even till today, they're still discovering bodies in homes and basements and apartments and so on.
You photographed also Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in his bunker, so you got to spend some time with him. How would you describe him?
Well, I think that my encounter with him, having spent several hours with him, was very similar to kind of spending time with somebody like Nelsona Mendele, who I spent time with after he was released from prison. That you feel sometimes with people that they're on another level, that they feel the world is on their shoulders. They have responsibility for their nation, for their people. And Zelensky is like that. And he was a very energetic character. He ranged from anger to laughter to despair. And you could really feel that he was a man that has risen to the occasion to defend his nation, and as he also believes, to defend Europe and beyond.
You of all people you can make this comparison. So comparing other conflicts and wars you documented and seeing the situation on field in Ukraine, in what phase of the war is it now? We have the date May 9th. Is it possible for the war to end by then, or is it just too naive to think so?
I think everybody has been wrong from the beginning trying to predict what's going to happen with Ukraine. So to say, yes, it's possible it could be at this end phase, it could be at the middle phase. It's amazingly primarily up to one person at this point. whether Putin decides to stop fighting, to negotiate, and so on. And then, of course, it'll be up to the Ukrainians and to the West to determine if there is a solution to this conflict. But at the moment, as we see another round of fighting, as the fighting moves now to the east and the south, that there is really no prediction on what could happen. It could go on for a long time. It could be a Bosnia-like war, or it could end like Croatia in a number of months. I don't think we can say anything at this point.
But in Russian-controlled areas, they're blocking the international press. So only Russian journalists can enter. What does this tell you?
I think that the Russians who don't believe that anybody can tell the truth, any journalist can tell the truth about what's happening, are limiting the ability for the world to see what's happening everywhere. And while the majority of atrocities seem to be being committed by the Russian forces, certainly on the Russian separatist side, where there are civilians who are also being attacked by Ukrainians, there are things that we just don't know what's going on.
This doesn't stop you. While millions of Ukrainians are fleeing out of the country, you said that you cannot wait to go back. So when do you plan to do this, and why are you going this time?
Well, I think that this is a conflict that needs to be documented. We need, as we've seen already, evidence needs to be accumulated, lives need to be accounted for, and it's important for myself and my colleagues to continue documenting what's going on. Also, as time goes by, people start to get bored, they start to get tired, and I think it's our responsibility to continue to remind the public that even if this is not on the front pages, or even though you've been watching this for several months, it's still going on, lives are still being affected, and we must pay attention to it.
The photos you took in Bosnia over 25 years ago ended up used in The Hague, proving war crimes in this country and helping prosecute war criminals. So we do have to stress the power and impact of documentary photography.
I think it's incredibly valuable. I think that the photographs that I took in Bijeljina in 1992, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, were actually said in the speech in the opening day of The Hague, was said to be an inspiration, or one of the inspirations for the creation of the Hague War Crimes Tribunal. And the fact that photography can play a role in helping indict and convict people of war crimes, I think is an important use of photography. And I expect that the photography that myself and my colleagues have done in Ukraine will provide the first level of documentation to help prosecutors build their cases.
What else photos you actually can mention that had the similar or same impact as these Bosnian photos had in the Hague Tribunal?
Well, I think one of the special things about photography, it has this ability to have a life that goes beyond the immediate, beyond the first day you see it, and so on. One of the photographs that I took in Panama in Central America in 1989, which was a photograph of a vice presidential candidate covered in the blood of his bodyguard being beaten by a paramilitary supporter of a dictator. That photograph had a lot of impact. In fact, when the United States invaded Panama several months after the photograph was taken, the President of the United States used the photograph as one of the justifications for the invasion. It's a rare experience for a president to speak about a photograph as a reason for a military intervention. And that photograph came to represent the fight for democracy. It came to represent the eventual overthrow of a dictatorship. And photographs have this ability to continue to live and have power and become part of culture, part of politics, part of policy, part of education. And that is something that's just a testament to the power of photography.
We can see that testament in Sarajevo this and the following months. This year is 30 years of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is why we have the exhibition Imagine Reflections on Peace. The visitors can see it in National Museum in Sarajevo until the end of July. So what kind of human stories do these photos tell, and why is it important to see them?
Well, the Seven Foundation wanted to explore this concept of peace. Gary Knight, who's one of the co-founders of the foundation, had gotten tired of documenting war and wanted to see what does peace mean, and what does it mean in each country, and what is a successful peace? What is peace here in Bosnia related to peace in Rwanda, Cambodia, Lebanon, Colombia, Northern Ireland? And they each have different meanings. And one of the things that you would hope, and we hope that people will get from this exhibition, by looking at the photographs and reading the stories of the people is an understanding of how can you make your piece better by taking lessons from people that have succeeded in a different way, and that we as humanity, as a civilization, can share these lessons to hopefully make things better. As Ukraine hopefully will move into their peaceful phase in the next hopefully immediate days, they too will have to find a way to live with their new world and how to make peace for themselves. Or in Afghanistan, you know, it's the Taliban have taken over. How can Afghanistan be at peace? What kind of lessons can they learn from countries that have been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? And what should they avoid to avoid the same mistakes that other people have made? We look at this exhibition and the book that accompanies it, which is also in Bosnian as well, as a guidebook, like a how to do peace. And hopefully the politicians and diplomats and students and other people will read it and be able to contribute to making things better for wherever they live.
But once in one of your catalogs called Liberty, Sloboda, you said war reminds us of our own fragility and how temporary the idea of liberty is. Is this exactly the message that you want to come across with the exhibitions that you do worldwide?
Absolutely. I think that we, those of us that are lucky not to live in war or never experience war, should not take what they have for granted, because you can see how quickly things can immediately change. As we've seen here in the former Yugoslavia, one day things are working, and the next day we're at war, the next day you don't even have a country anymore. And this happens so fast. February 23rd, 2022, people were out in restaurants in Kyiv, ordering food, going to bars, going to nightclubs. 24 hours later, the country's at war and lives are changed. So it's incredibly important to realize how fragile, how precious, how valuable a free life is for you to live your life with your family, to do what you want, to be able to live in peace is something we should always be pursuing and hoping for and never take away from anybody.
But however, your book, Shadow of Memory, done also with a professor at the New York University, Lauren Walsh, is also about your shadows of the past. So how difficult it was to revisit these images and then to feel obliged to start writing down the stories behind them?
Well, doing the book Shadow of Memory, which is based on an exhibition that we had here in Sarajevo in partnership with Memory Module, was this idea of looking at photographs that had never been seen before. I have a number of photographs that many people know, but what are the other photographs that took place that day or days before or days after? What about those stories? And now having the war 30 years later, it gives us sort of the room and ability to take in more and understand more and see what happened in a greater in-depth way. And also my own kind of experiences coming through in what I write in the book, and my experiences in what I photographed are something that changes over time. As I look back as a historical record, it means a little bit different than what I saw during my first book, Blood and Honey, which was produced almost in real time. And so again, kind of this testament to photography can have these different lives, and photographs can kind of have different meanings, and people that see that work today relate to it in a very different way when they were 30 years younger, for instance.
When you come back from the war zone, when you throw your bags on the floor, start unpacking, are you the same person who left home? Do you have fears, anxieties, panic attacks, nightmares? How do you actually handle these dark experiences that you've been through? How do you get out of the darkness, or do you actually?
Well, first of all, are any of us ever the same after experiencing anything, right? You incorporate your experiences into yourself, and they become part of your personality and so on. So I can never say, am I a different person because I went to Ukraine, or I went to Bosnia, or I went here or there. No, this is who I am because it's all part of me.
But it is a psychological challenge.
I think, of course, there is a challenge. It is very difficult to document this, especially to having done it for more than 30 years. And I think using Ukraine as an example where I'm taking photographs that look very similar to the photographs that I took in Bosnia and other places 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and so on. It is hard to imagine that I'm once again seeing the same things that I had hoped I would never see before. But that being said, for myself, my ability to understand why I'm doing this is that there is a purpose in it, that the photographs can have impact, that the photographs do affect people. So by knowing that there's a purpose for me doing it, it has helped me accept some of the difficulties. And when things do become too difficult, as it does for myself and many journalists, you know, you talk to colleagues, you talk to professionals, but I think understanding that there's a reason behind it, and that there's not the impact that I would love, which would be the end of war, which is not realistic, but the fact that my photographs have helped people, that have done something good, helps me accept what I see.
And recently you took another professional challenge. So a few years ago you started filming a documentary with Lauren Walsh called Biography of a Photo, which actually traces the life stories of two iconic images you already mentioned, one taken in Panama and one taken in Bosnia. Can you tell us some more about this documentary, and when can we expect to see it? Because there was a pandemic, now we have war in Ukraine. How far did you get with the production?
So the film is in production. We're hopefully going to end it soon. We're happy to be supported by Film Center Sarajevo, and we have a Bosnian producer, Srđan Saranic, and so we're moving along. And what's amazing about, I think, our concept that Lauren and I came up with was, like, we don't think anybody's kind of looked at a photograph and actually done a biography of the photograph. This is when it was born, and then the photograph takes on a life of its own. And as it grows older, it has different impacts in foreign policy, education, culture, man on the street. People remember these photographs, not even just in Bosnia or Panama, but in Latin America, in Europe. And it's, again, a testament to the power of photography and what photographs can do. And to be honest with you, that these two photographs, the one from Panama and the one from Bijeljina, have gone beyond my control. They have been adopted and taken in by many people. The photographs also are connected personally to family members that are connected to each photograph.
Can you tell us more about each photo?
So the photograph in Panama, which is the photograph of the vice presidential candidate covered in the blood of his bodyguard being beaten. The bodyguard was killed protecting him, and the family of the bodyguard feels that their loved one, their brother, their son, had died for democracy, but unfortunately nobody in Panama recognizes the sacrifice they made, and they're using the photograph to try to get recognition for their lost relative. In Bosnia, the Pekovic family, the daughter of one of the victims, Tifa Shabanovic, who's in the photograph, she wants the tigers, Arkan's tigers, to be indicted for war crimes based on the evidence that's provided in the photograph. So she currently has a case in the Serbian war crimes tribunal trying to indict the participants for war crimes. So it is amazing, as each photograph sort of became more and more well known, the history and the connection of these individual families became less and less known. The photographs started to represent much bigger issues than what represents or what it means to each individual family member. So in the film, we make sure that their stories, their histories, and their desires are documented, explained, and seen in conjunction with the life of the photograph.
When can we expect to see it?
I'm pretty confident that we will have this film out by next year.
Okay. You do have a special connection with Sarajevo. You keep coming back to this city. One of the reasons is because you co-founded Seven Academy along with well-known photographers such as Gary Knight and Paul Lowe. Basically, it's the hub of international network of emerging talents in the fields of journalism and video storytelling. So seeing the wars and armed conflicts are not a thing of the past. Are you in a way creating an army of documentarians and photographers through this academy?
That's a nice way to put it, an army. I wouldn't maybe prefer it to be so militaristic, but without question, I think that educating people to document the world around them, and doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with conflict. It can be any kind of story that's important in their communities and beyond. Doing it in a trained way as a journalist, with journalistic integrity, with journalistic ethics, with journalistic rules, is incredibly important. I don't think we have to even look further than the war in Ukraine to see what happens when a country such as Russia decides to shut down independent media and create their own narrative, where journalists are not able to tell the story of what's happening, so a population doesn't even actually know what's happening in their name. It's our goal to make sure that we are educating as many people in the world of visual journalism, especially from the majority world, which we do free of charge, to make sure that storytellers are out there, journalists are out there, informing and documenting and holding people responsible for what happens.
So how many talents have you discovered and educated so far? How can others apply?
They can go to vii.academy and learn more about the different courses. We're continuously having courses. We're teaching courses in English, in Bosnian, in Russian, in Spanish, in Arabic, in Kurdish, in French. So we have also a school opening up in south of France, in Arles, next year. And we're also, of course, teaching online. And we have had hundreds of students go through a variety of different courses. And we've had some incredible visual journalists, men and women, non-binary photographers, just working and providing their communities and beyond an incredible documentation of the world around them.
Okay, so before you go back to Ukraine at the end of the year, as far as I understood, what are the new activities and projects that you will be working meanwhile?
Well, we'll be continuing, Lauren Surjan and I will be continuing work on the film. That's one of our primary goals. And we, of course, this exhibit will also, Imagine Reflection of Peace, will also be opening up at the United States Institute of Peace in May in Washington, D.C. So we're also looking forward to that audience, which will primarily be political. A lot of people from the U.S. State Department and politicians from D.C., as well as school groups and others, will be attending that exhibition. So we're trying to have impact with our work and to start conversations and have people thinking about what's going on. Because, 30 years ago, we said to ourselves, I cannot believe that there's another war in Europe. And now, 30 years later, we're saying, in the 21st century, I cannot believe we're once again photographing a war in Europe. We don't want to say that again.
Ron, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
My pleasure, thank you.